We ask the questions.
What is needed in the world?
Is that going to be?
Joyce Banda is Malawi's first female president and only the second woman to lead a country on the continent. She took over when President Bingu wa Mutharika died in office in April 2012. But even though she was vice president, there were some who challenged her right to the top job, leading to a tense 48 hours where the country teetered on the edge of violence. Her elevation was only secured when the army agreed it would back the constitution. Born in 1950 near the southern town of Zomba, by the age of 25 she was living with her husband in Kenya, but took the decision to leave with her 3 children to escape what she described as an abusive marriage. She spent 12 years running and creating a number of businesses in Malawi, and her success drove her to set up the National Association of Businesswomen, a group that lends money to small-scale traders. She also established the Joyce Banda Foundation that assists Malawian children and orphans through education. She moved into politics in 1999 and won a seat in Parliament, going on to hold a number of cabinet positions. She was elected Vice President in 2009. In 2011, the President tried unsuccessfully to have her removed from the post. Now, she leads one of the poorest countries in the world. President Banda, thank you for talking to Al Jazeera. You're the president of one of the poorest countries in the world. You have a high infant mortality rate. You have a growing problem with HIV/AIDS. What keeps you awake at night?
Malawians' resilience and Malawi's determination to see a better Malawi. So what keeps me awake at night is the fact that we are sure, and I am sure, that we shall do it. We shall reduce the maternal mortality rates and the child mortality rates. We will reduce those. Maybe you haven't seen the latest statistics, but we have also reduced the HIV/AIDS prevalence from 12% to something like 9%. So we're making progress. It's tough. We are passing through a very difficult time. But we realize that in order for us to get better, we need to pass through this period.
You have only been in power since April, and there was a difficulty before you could take over the post of president. How difficult were those few hours after the death of the former president and your appointment into the position which constitutionally was called for?
Yeah, it was difficult. My worry during that 48 hours was Malawians, because I just felt that Malawians deserve better. They had just gone through a very, very difficult time. And an organization called Public Affairs Committee in Malawi had called the president to, in 60 days, call for a referendum or resign. So he passed away within the 60 days. And this came from the fact that Malawians were really, really frustrated. So when this happened, I had one thing in my mind that was very clear to me, and that Malawians deserve better. Malawians deserve better leadership, and Malawians deserve a better life. And so for me, the Constitution was on my side. And my legal team told me that no matter how long it takes, the Constitution would have to be respected. I would like to thank the whole international community that were so alert and awake and insisted and persuaded most Malawians in authority to respect the Constitution. So I waited, and I knew that at the end of the day, justice would prevail.
What was the key moment? Was it the support of important allies like the United Kingdom and the United States? Or was it the phone call you put to the head of the army to say, are you with me or are you with the others?
To be honest, I didn't know what was going on the international scene. I didn't know how many from the international community were intervening on my behalf. I get to know bits and pieces of that now. But what was critical is Malawians themselves. How many Malawians in critical positions would come to my side and insist that the Constitution should be respected? The Army General in Malawi is mandated under our constitution that when there's ambiguity or there are problems or there's imminent conflict coming, he is the one who should stand up and protect the constitution. And I didn't even know in those 48 hours that he was on my side, that he would respect the constitution. There was so much pressure, he was under so much pressure, just like the head of the police and other heads of governance institutions. But I called him, and he didn't even hesitate. He said, I've already alerted the army that we shall respect the constitution. How he came to that decision, I shall never know. But all I know is that that one decision by him turned around the whole history of that country. Because even those that were hesitating, the moment he came, especially those that knew what the constitution said, when he made that one decision to come and be on my side, everybody else started to rally around me. And that's what helped to ease the tension that was there, because my worry was that there was a conflict that was going to come. People were going to die, and maybe there was going to be bloodshed.
How real was that concern that Malawi could go down a road which could lead it to a very dark future?
Yeah, it was very real, because I don't know if you know that for 1 year and a half, I had been sidelined because of the position I took on certain things. In the year 2009, I was elected alongside the president of the country. The constitution in Malawi says the vice president shall be a running mate and shall be elected. Because of that, I had a constitutional role under oath that I shall protect the constitution. And all along, I tried my level best to protect the constitution. And so for me, when I got to this point, all I knew was that we needed to respect the constitution. And when that act finally happened, I gave a speech upon taking oath that we needed to look forward. There was no time for us to revenge. I needed to find a way of easing the tension that was already building up. Because the fact that I had been sidelined for a year and a half, it was extremely difficult for many people to accept that I could come back and take leadership and then move forward without taking revenge. And some people, because I had not been on the scene, particularly in cabinet, they felt that it would be possible for them to take the law into their own hands and take over government and constitutionally.
Since taking office, you've managed to reopen the doors to international aid for Malawi, which for a long time had been closed off because of the actions of the previous government and your predecessor. Why have the doors opened to you?
I think the reason why the doors are open is that during the time that I was sidelined, I don't know if you know, but I was expelled from the party in December of 2010. So I went ahead and formed my own party. And going around establishing that party, I kept telling people what I thought was going wrong. But I also kept telling people what I thought would be the solutions, the steps that we needed to take to correct the situation and to bring the economy back on course. And so because in that 1 year and a half, I was aware of what we needed to do, I moved very fast as soon as I took oath to take those steps. And I knew Malawians were watching because I had said it so many times. The first was to get back to IMF and get back on course on the program. That was number one. Number two, to go back to the donors that had withdrawn aid. But even breaking up our relationship with Britain was so devastating for most Malawians because of our historical relations with Britain. So another step that I had to take was to go back to the British and make sure that the relationship is restored. And I'm just pleased to say that we've made a lot of progress in all this, including restoring that relationship with Great Britain. And so that continues to give Malawians hope. So, and as you may have heard, most of the concerns of our donors were our governance record and human rights record. And so I also took the laws that the donors had problems with, that were termed the bad laws, and gave them back to the people to discuss. take them back to Parliament, because the constitution in Malawi does not allow me to alter or change any laws. And so therefore, if there are laws that I think people need to discuss, they have to go to the people. And the people are the ones who make the laws in Malawi through their members of parliament. And so they found that I did that, and I'm just pleased to say that one after another, the laws that were taken to parliament have been repealed.
You talked about the International Monetary Fund, and of course you have opened the way to $157 million over the next 3 years. How will that money be spent in Malawi?
I think what I have said to Malawians, and Malawians have agreed, is that we need to find ways of moving from aid to trade. We need to find a way of recognizing the private sector as the engine for growth. I would like to see us use this money in the short term to correct the situation, to cushion the shock of the 40% devaluation of our kwacha, to ensure that the poor are not suffering, because there's no way we can avoid that when you devalue your kwacha by 40%. What breaks my heart is that we could have avoided this if we had listened to the IMF and World Bank. If we had devalued by 10% every year, we would still have devalued by 40% by now. But we had to do it at once. And so that brought about its own negative effects. So some of this money will be for us for budgetary support, but for also to help the poor in the rural areas by coming up with programs that help the poor have an income, like public works and so on and so forth.
Because, of course, your critics say the International Monetary Fund means that there will be higher prices, higher fuel prices, higher food prices, and the poorer in Malawi, and there are a lot of them, will suffer because of this.
Yeah, we're very much aware of that, and that is why I'm talking about even the grant that we have asked the World Bank to give us, to go for programs that support to cushion that shock, so that the poor don't suffer necessarily. But the programs that we are putting in place now, for example, in my own office, I have established what I'm calling two initiatives. The first initiative is on maternal health and safe motherhood. That I will fight forever, because I don't believe that any woman in this world should die giving birth to another life. That's not acceptable. But the second one is a presidential initiative on hunger and on poverty and hunger reduction. And under that is to encourage thousands of Malawians grow cash crops that have export potential. And we have chosen 6 crops initially. And we are in the process of forming cooperatives under that initiative. And we know that next year we shall double or treble our export of crops. So this will begin to bring economic empowerment to our rural masses.
You suggest that economic growth in Malawi next year could be 4.7%. Is that perhaps optimistic?
No. That we must achieve. But I am being told by experts that if we want in the next 10 years to turn around the economy of Malawi, then we must be aiming at even more than 4%. But for the time being, that is the ambitious mark that we've set for ourselves. And I have no reason whatsoever to doubt that we shall achieve it.
You, of course, yourself are trying to set an example when it comes to austerity by cutting back on the presidential plane, by cutting down on the size of the motorcade. Do you think that sends a message?
My concern is that when you're passing through a period such as this, and most Malawians are having to do without, and are making sacrifices, and they're making those sacrifices happily, not because it's okay, but because they feel it's necessary for us as a nation to do it, then I must be the first person to set the example. It is not a luxury in Malawi to have a presidential jet. For me, I must encourage the relationship between me and my neighbors. Mozambique is very critical for Malawi, and so is Zambia and Tanzania. And I must be able to visit those countries often. But if I have to go by commercial flight, it takes me 2 days to go to Zambia, because I have to go to South Africa and then the following day go to Zambia. If I have a plane, it takes me 45 minutes. But I have said I must demonstrate to Malawians that we are in this together. And I must be the first person to set an example. And if I must take 2 days to go and visit President Gebuza to talk about power generation or to talk about our facilities at the port, then let it be. But at the end of the day, we shall be fine. We might get another plane in the future, who knows? But there are so many presidents in this world who are operating, running their countries without a plane.
When you talk about your neighbours, there's also the controversial decision, some would say, to cancel the EU summit in Malawi because you wouldn't let President al-Bashir from Sudan arrive without the threat of arresting him and handing him over to the ICC. Why did you do that?
President Bashir, I respect President Bashir as a president of Sudan. And I respect him totally. As foreign minister, I know I met him and I worked with him because he was very close to my late president. But he was invited to come for the COMESA summit last year. And as a result of that, the international community went against Malawi. And Malawi lost out. This time, the only appeal I made to the African Union was that he could send a delegation, but I think coming was a problem for us as well as for the whole international community. Now, if based on that request on our part, the African Union feels that they must move the African Union summit back to Addis Ababa, then we are prepared as a nation to respect that decision.
Would you have been happy to have President Bashir arrested on Malawian soil if he appeared?
No, I didn't even see him coming. Yeah, but my view was that he was just going to send a delegation. That's what I thought. Because I thought that if there was anybody who was aware of the heavy price we had paid by him attending COMESA, it was President Bashir and the African Union. Now, so I didn't even see that happen. So I didn't even think of arresting him because I didn't think he was going to come.
But if he had, would you have ordered his arrest? Would you have been happy to see him arrested and handed over
He
to
would
the
not
ICC?
have come. So I don't want to preempt because I just don't see it coming. So I don't even want to dwell on this at all because it's now water under the bridge. The African Union have made a decision. Malawians have decided to respect that decision.
How do you view the growing influence of China in Africa?
Well, I believe that competition is good and competition is healthy. Now, if our traditional donors support us, that's fine. But if China comes and supports us, it's fine. But what I have noticed is going in other countries is that the agreements differ from country to country. So it just depends on how you negotiate your relationship with China that will prevail. So I am glad that they're in Africa and they're helping African countries.
Of course, critics suggest that it's a new form of colonialism, what the Chinese are doing. Is that a view that you would subscribe to?
Well, no, I don't. I mean, they're not running Malawi, and I haven't had any feeling whatsoever that they came into Malawi, they built our parliament, they built us roads, and as a result of that, they have influenced the way we do things. I haven't even met the Chinese ambassador ever since I took over. Nobody has tried to influence me.
You're the first female leader in Southern Africa. With that, does there come a weight of expectation on you?
Yes, it does. It does. To start with, last year, the Forbes magazine voted me the third most powerful woman in Africa. The responsibility started from there. I started to look at myself as an agent for change that must also stand out and be exemplary and be a role model and work not only to empower Malawian women, but all African women. The good news is that African men have demonstrated that they're prepared to allow their women to participate in leadership. And so for me, my task now is to help as many women as possible get into leadership. Because now we cannot say we live in a patriarchal society, therefore our men will not allow us to participate. If you were in Malawi the past three years, you could have seen that in all the abuses I went through and all the harassment I went through, it was men who stood up for me. It was men who called, they called in at the radio stations. They issued statements and supported women, because 3/4 of the women in my country are rural-based. So while they were crying with me, there was very little they could do. But men stood up. And the 48 hours, it was thousands and thousands of men calling me, telling me they were ready to support me. Because of that, I think it's an advantage African women must take right now. When we find that our men are prepared to work with us and give us support, especially when they believe in us, especially when they trust us. In any case, being a politician has made me discover that being in politics is a love affair. You must fall in love with the people, and the people must fall in love with you. And you find that once they fall in love with you, they'll stand by you, and they'll believe in you. And that's where I am. And with all that on my side, I must move forward and move aggressively and support fellow women to get into leadership as well.
Well, I was going to ask, how much has your political view been influenced by the start you had as an organiser for women's rights many, many years ago? How much of it is influenced too by the problems you had, which you've noted in public with your first marriage, which was an abusive marriage? How much has that informed the person, the president you've become today?
No, I think that when I look back, I go back to my five years old, that I had a progressive father who believed in his sons and daughters. So he gave us equal opportunity. But he began to tell me at 5 years old that I was going to do something great in my country. He said a friend of him, he's told him, he was not very educated, but he told me throughout my life that I was going to succeed and I was going to do well. Then I get married, and then it's an abusive marriage, and it looked like, well, what was all that about? My father now doubted this friend of his who had told him I was going to be a great woman, I was going to do great things. But I think it was a blessing in disguise for me to stay in an abusive marriage for 10 years, because it prepared me for leadership. The leadership that my father had prepared me when I was growing up was just enhanced by this period I stayed in an abusive marriage, because I became more determined to make sure when I walk out first, which socially in Africa at that point in time was unacceptable for a woman to do. I walked out, but then 24 months later I got married again to a fine man, and then succeeded, and then prospered, and my businesses grew. And then at that point I got bothered. I started to worry about what was happening to other women who were not as brave as myself, who were not as fortunate as myself to find a good husband. And I made up my mind that I was going to do something about the situation.
How do you make life better for ordinary Malawians who, in most cases, earn just over $1 a day, survive on that, find life very difficult? What would you consider to be a success when you go for election in 2014, when you look out across Malawi? What would be a success for you?
For me, the success in Malawi in 2014, between now and 2014, I have 18 months. And that's not a lot of time. But I know one thing for sure, and that is to say that in this period, I shall make sure that we create thousands of jobs through agriculture. So we are starting now. This week, they are mobilizing groups of women and youth at grassroots to ensure that they go grow crops. We've chosen 6 for this year. And I know that will be the beginning of bringing money into rural households. For me, when I get to 2014 and go back to ask the people for a vote, if each one of them is having 3 meals a day, that's what matters to me, because I know that now it's not happening. And I want to get to 2014 and talk to the people and say, give me a vote. But they will look into their house and see that they have an income, whether through wage employment or self-employment. But that's the task that I have. And I know that it will be done. It will be possible.
President Banda, thank you very much indeed for talking to Al Jazeera.